this thing back on the road. This thing is so much fun. It's amazing the difference it makes when you have it properly tuned. Even with the large injectors that we talked about, the duty cycle is at 35, which is crazy. And that's the problem when you have a car with this kind of horsepower level. When someone builds it and they don't really put it together well, and they don't have proper understanding of what's oversized, what's too big. But we made it work. And until he decides to later on upgrade and do it our way, it's going to function just fine with the E85 setup. But this thing just feels amazing. I mean, the torque, the feel, 10%, 15% throttle, and that thing just moves. I mean, you can literally drive daily with 27 PSI and never hit half a bar, and I mean, it feels fast, which is super impressive. I mean, this platform of a car is so amazing. The 997s, they really made a really awesome reputation because of the reliability, the proven engine, which is the Mezger, and a lot of people understand that the Mezger engine is derived from the race cars. You know, Hans Mezger designed that engine, and that engine is he's a legend. GT1 race car engine is in this car, and this is why it's such a tunable and desirable platform, because you can't beat it. Dry sump system, slap some big turbos, upgrade the internals, and you got 1,000 horsepower. I mean, who would complain? Where your DFI engines, there's going to be a lot more involved, and some of the new engines, you know, you really can't even tune the factory ECU. You have to use a Motec or a Civix. But this thing just is, every time I get into one of these, and I drive these all the time, I own one myself, I still enjoy it, and it's the best car I've ever honestly owned in my life. And I've driven Lamborghinis and Ferraris because I work on those, but this Porsche 911, especially with this power level, it's just insane. It's literally, when the customer gets this car back, because this car wasn't a runner, as we went over earlier, literally in 3 shops, and he really didn't get to enjoy it when we bought it. When he gets it back, he's gonna be blown away. The way this thing pulls, the smoothness, the throttle, the adjustments that we did, the variable valve lift. The car used to not even run or idle. Now it idles and runs. It feels like a stock car, even looks like a stock car, and that's kind of the whole point. We like to keep it that way. He will upgrade the wheels and make them look nicer, but this car, I mean, I'm pushing right now, and it's like pushing me to the seat, and I'm at 3,500 RPMs. It's something you have to experience to really know what I'm talking about, because I can sit here and tell you how great it is, but until you get in it, you won't understand how much torque this car has. It's amazing. 997 turbo. So we're going to actually do a couple of pulls. We already did our final tuning, and we're pretty much driving it in. I want to make sure everything's perfect before I ship the car back to Michigan to this customer. And this customer's been really great. It's been really understanding some of the issues that we've encountered, of course, with the engine, and a couple of the upgrades that we needed to do to get it running. He had us lower the car properly with proper suspension, and when he gets it back, I think he's going to be really happy, and he'll probably end up keeping it forever. And eventually he wants to do a big bore build, which something we don't like doing on these cars is, what I didn't mention was, when you build this engine, we don't like to just upgrade your rods and pretty much upgrade your internal components that are not oversized, because the whole point is, if you're going to spend that kind of money, you might as well have a 3.8, 3.9, a 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, whatever you choose, because it almost costs the same once you're in there. And the reason why is you have to push so much more boost through a 3.6 engine than if you had a 4, 4.3, a 4.0, 4.1. On a 4.1, technically, literally, you can build, in 1 bar of boost, you can build 1,000 horsepower with the 80.40 millimeter crankshaft stroker engine. This is not a stroker. This is a 76.4 millimeter crank that was built by AMS, the bottom end. And it's got its disadvantages. You know, the RPM, the power band, everything. It's a little bit. It's not as good as a 80/40, but it's very, very amazing still, and it's very strong bottom end once you upgrade the rods. But when we do it, we always advise customers go bigger, more flow, more air, more. You got to use less pressure. It's just all around the torque, the low end. It's amazing. Just squeeze it into the seat. So let's do some driving. This thing just pulls like a rocket. So I'm just so impressed with how it drives. Of course, the disadvantage is when you're running 85, you got to make sure you mix your fuels properly, and you measure them out and use a E85 tester, because if you have the E85 fuel wrong, where it's actually 60 E60 or E67, because by law you can call a fuel E85 and be within, I believe it's 57 to 85 and still call it E85, so you'll blow your engine. So you definitely want to go on the lower setting. We have a boost gauge in this vehicle that controls different levels. We have A, B, and C. So A being stock 1 bar, C 22 psi, which is about 1.3, 1.4 bars, and then we have B, which is 27.5 psi, so that's 1,000 horsepower. And that's what we're in right now. I mean, this thing's insane. It'll make you sick. The G-forces is just amazing. It's just phenomenal. So much fun. So it's just, I wish there was no cars in front, so we're also following the speed limit. We're not going over the speed limit. I mean, it just seems like we are, but we get down low, so we're following the law here, okay, guys? Don't even say anything. We're following the law. We're not speeding. I mean, this road is like 60-mile-an-hour road, so if we're at 30 miles an hour, we can push it up to 60. So don't mention anything to me about that, because I abide by the rules and the laws. That's the number one thing here. Perfect example why we pin and glue the fittings versus welding them. This car has a coolant leak. 3 years later, porosity of this aluminum being expanded by welding eventually develops minor pinholes, small pinholes, and allows the coolant to leak. Took 3 years for this to happen, and now there's a leak. This is why we don't weld coolant fittings. Why take a chance? Yeah, I know. A lot of you guys may say, it's a poor weld. Nope, these welds are very nice welds. I've inspected them. It has nothing to do with a poor weld. It's not leaking where the weld is. It's leaking right at the area next to the weld where the porous metal is. Off the intake plenums. Here's another problem besides the coolant fittings, is if you notice all that oil residue on the cooler, and sometimes that actually makes its way all the way from here, from the bottom to the back to the front section of the front crankshaft, makes it look like the seal is leaking. And typically you have this mess right here under the back. If your 911 turbo has this, more than likely, if someone's been in it, here's what I typically find. So the cooling, both cooler housing portions and actually the whole housing has a RTV type sealant that's applied. Looks like they use some kind of a Loctite 5900, which we don't use. We use something way better, that actually from Porsche, and it unseals because either the bolts are not tightened, which are underneath the coolers, and it causes this nasty oil leak. That's where that comes from. You got the cooler housing off, and here's the issue. So when they ran the RTV, look what they did. They ran it this way instead of actually following the casting on the opposite side, because this is where it meets. So there was no sealant between this area, so the oil was spilling out. And I'll show you this right quick. So here's underneath our housing. As you can see, that area is bare. This is where they crossed, right there. That's why we had oil spewing out. Well, great job whoever did this.